Now I want to talk about a man that apparently so many people forget to mention or to recognize as one of the most important individuals within the first couple of centuries of the so-called belief system of the establishment of Christianity. But he wasn't a part of Christianity. He was an individual that held true to the true position of this ancient belief system of the ancient Hebrew Israelite system that I've been discussing about. And this is Saint Antipas. Saint Antipas that discussed in Revelation 2. This also ties in with the discussion of the falling away from the faith, which a lot of people, the churches today, talk about how this is the time that now, today, in our lifetime, is this prophecy is being fulfilled. But let me tell you something. It was already fulfilled. It already happened. After Yahusha, our Savior, ascended back into heaven after the so-called crucifixion, which that's another subject and another story we're going to talk about, we could see a decline in the immoral state within society during that period of time. A perfect example is with Paul, the Apostle Paul, when he wrote to the assemblies of the Galatians. This is around 48, 49 CE. He was astonished of how quickly, I'm looking at some of my notes here, he was astonished how quickly they became deceived and deserted the truth, the teaching message other than the good news that of Yahusha, and then therefore place themselves under Yahusha's curse. This is in Galatians 1, chapter 1, verses 6 to 10. So for the next decade or so, we could see that Paul and the disciples were fighting against this kind of teaching, the teaching of evil spirits. And again, that's going to be another discussion about evil spirits that the church has, or the, I guess, main faith-based system has made us believe regarding evil spirits. But it's not what I'll explain this all later on. So as Paul and the disciples would fight and speak against these so-called evil spirits of teachings, right? We could say what the modern Bible versions talk about, the doctrine of evil spirits in 1 Timothy 6:12. We can see this permeates throughout the majority of early followers. And this is why Paul would proclaim that some shall fall away. He's talking about these periods of times, not in the far future, but during those periods of time. So some shall fall away from the faith, paying attention to misleading spirits and teachings of evil spirits. And this is 1 Timothy 4, 1 through 2. For then he quotes, "For there shall be a time when they shall not bear sound teachings, but according to their own desires, they shall heap up for themselves teachers, tickling in their ears, and they shall indeed turn their ears away from the truth." What is the truth? The Torah. And we will discuss more about the Torah in itself and the fulfillment of the Torah in later discussions. But then to continue the Torah and be turned aside to myths. What are these myths? These myths are the false teachings, this closed system that Judaism has created, going back. Remember from other discussions I discussed with you, going back to 870, as far as 870 BCE. These are the false teachings, the leaven that leavens the whole lump, the traditions of men. So when we come to the end of the first century, we could see a closing of these doctrines of evil spirits, which seemed to be widespread, right? But as we read in Revelation, we could see that there's one city, Pergamon, that dwelt an assembly of which was called Pergamos. And in Pergamon, which is the modern day Turkey, This was the metropolis of pagan deities, of worshiping the temples such as Jupiter, Zeus, Athena, Asclepius. Asclepius is another thing I'm going to talk to you about later on in the future. And Dionysus. These are all pagan belief systems that were apart in this major city. Now, it was described by Yahusha as the throne of the serpent. Another thing that's been mistranslated and what we know to be, because we read it in so many versions, is the throne of Satan. But that's incorrect. And the dwelling place, not of Satan, but Baal, which is the corruption and falseness of the worshiping that they have now endured within this region. Now, this was in Revelation 2:13. But although it was a place of great lawlessness, right? Yahusha describes one man, and like I mentioned, it's Saint Antipas. And he was the faithful overseer of the assembly of Pergamos. And in Revelation 2:13, we could see that Saint Antipas, as Yahusha's trustworthy witness, because you can read that even in the modern versions that we have, he was a trustworthy witness. Saint Antipas was killed around 68 or 92 CE. Now, a lot of historical discussions with this. It varies. So it's really hard to say exactly when, but around that time, so around 100 CE. And you can also read it that he was killed due to his faith and holding the true name of Yahusha, right? Not this Jesus part of the church, and we're going to be discussing the name and all these other things and how Jesus and everything was derived. But Saint Antipas held to the true name of Yahusha. Now, there's nowhere in historical or other texts that state his death or how he's described his death. I believe it was the same accusation as when Yahusha was out in the first century talking against the Pharisees, which was blasphemy. Because you could see here in Revelation 2:13 that he held fast to Yahusha's name and did not deny the belief of him, right? And it reveals that St. Antipas must have been persecuted for not denouncing Yahusha's name and the belief according to the true, which I believe is the living Torah, Yahusha as the fulfillment of the living Torah. So most likely he was stoned for the accusation of the Pharisee law of blasphemy. So this is the time that I'm convinced the true falling away from the faith was around 100 CE. Not now or not a future prophecy, because this is where Paul was talking about it in 1 Timothy. Now, although the text doesn't really speak about him, St. Antipas, being Natsidim. Now, this word Natsidim I'm going to discuss later on in another discussion regarding, but it's what we understand as a Nazareth, right? So he doesn't really discuss it because I believe he was one of the watchmen, right? That's described in Jeremiah 31. And that he was a guardian of Yahuwah and part of the branches of the faith, and this is in Isaiah 11:1. Now, he was the last individual to fight against all this corruption. And since then, now has gone and given the new birth of pagan belief systems such as Christianity. And this would be discussed in Revelation 13:1 and Revelation 17:1 through 6. And although Christianity was first used in Antioch around 43 AD, Acts 11:26, 1 Peter 4:16, it was used as a derogatory remark. So that was one of the last covenant soldiers who fought the true name of Yahusha and the true belief system of this everlasting covenant that we will be talking about later. Shalom, everyone.